Welcome back to Yahoo Finance Live, everyone. Russia alleges the UN is misleading the international community during a UN Security Council meeting. Those comments were later rebuked by U.S. representatives, all while Russia maintains 100,000 troops on the border of Ukraine. Here with what you need to know from today's UN Security Council meeting is Zachary Witlin, Eurasia Group senior analyst. And Zachary, if anything, going into this and kind of right out of the gate, it showed us that there wasn't going to be any firm type of resolution. What most notably, if anything, from this particular council meeting, though, could we potentially see some type of footing be gained off of in terms of the relationship between the international community and Russia?
Right. So first, thank you for having me. I think we're going to be stuck in a period of negotiations for at least for the next few weeks, assuming that we don't get to a major military escalation. A lot of what we saw today at the United Nations was repeating talking points. I think that the US and allies in particular wanted to make sure that on the world stage, they made their argument quite clearly. And for Russia was the same. I think one of the most interesting points that actually came up today was China repeating many of Russia's talking points, which is something that could be expected, even though one can only assume that China does not want to see a major military escalation in Ukraine during the Beijing Olympics.
Let me ask you about that. How close is the alliance, or is there an alliance between China and Russia right now? What kind of information do they share with each other, and how deep do those ties really go?
Alliance is too strong of a term. Partnership is better. Certainly, Russia and China both see it as long-term and strategically important. But there have to be quite a few caveats. One being that Russia economically is far more dependent on selling commodities to Europe and further afield than its actual relationship with China would suggest. There is growing cooperation in strategically important areas, as well as sharing of intelligence and communications from the security apparatuses. But ultimately, China and Russia see overlap in their view of the world, particularly of the US's role in the current world order, and see themselves as in an alliance of convenience, not alliance, I already said, in a partnership of convenience for wanting to push back on the role of the US in the world and promote their own views of things. But it should not be overestimated.
I want to play a quick clip for the sake of this conversation with regard to how we've seen this play out thus far and in the UN Security Council discussion, some of the very elements that we're discussing here. We've got even more comments from in this quick clip here between Russian military and intelligence services and the type of disinformation through state-owned media and proxy sites. Let's roll the tape real quick.
Russian military and intelligence services are spreading disinformation through state-owned media and proxy sites. And they are attempting without any factual basis to paint Ukraine and Western countries as the aggressors to fabricate a pretext for attack.
And I would just want to get your reaction to that and what this positions in terms of the U.S. messaging directly to Russia and even to China as well, perhaps.
Well, certainly, the U.S. wants to make it clear that Washington and its allies are absolutely prepared if it comes to a major military escalation. I should say that our view at Eurasia Group is that on balance, we expect that a diplomatic resolution is still possible. Not a quick one, as I was alluding to before, one that still has room for significant escalation. But given the significant deployment of forces on a level that has not been seen since the last time that Russia intervened militarily in Ukraine in 2014, it's a significant enough possibility that the US wants to signal that it understands that the groundwork is being laid if Russia chooses to take that option and wants to be prepared for either possibility.
And I want to talk to you about the leverage that Russia has over Europe vis-a-vis its energy situation and its notable deficit in liquefied natural gas, which has been a point of contention over the winter. I just got a report today that EU is actually shutting down the Nord Stream 2 pipeline on hold for compliance review. I guess that's going to take more supply or potential supply offline. How much is Russia holding this over the negotiations table right now?
I think it's tangential. There has already been problems with natural gas supplies to Europe. From Russia's point of view, they're meeting contractual minimums, but as this has been a particularly cold winter and there's been supply shortages, I think Europe has been disappointed that they have not been able to secure additional volumes. And it seems that Russia is taking that as an opportunity to point out why a good relationship with Russia is important for Europe to ensure continued supply in the future. That said, Nord Stream 2, though it is constructed, has not been operational. And Germany has gone as far as to make it clear that if there is a significant military escalation in Ukraine, scuttering the project completely is not off the table. And that remains part of the equation here, that Europe wants to remind Russia that even though there are some differences with Washington over how aggressively they should respond, over their assessment of how likely it is that Russia is about to choose the military option over the diplomatic one, I think that there is a reminder there that if push came to shove, there would not be nearly as much daylight between Brussels and Washington, as well as European partners, as it might seem from the past week.
And so with U.S. Senate back in session this week, what effectiveness at this point would sanctions have, if any?
So the threat of sanctions, it's meant to pile on the costs and to make it hopefully less likely that we get to a significant military scenario beyond what we've seen in Ukraine since 2014, 2015. The White House has been providing information either directly or into the press about the types of options that are on the table. These would absolutely be more significant than what we've seen if we get to that point. This could include blacklisting Russia's major financial institutions that would impair access to hard currency in the dollar. It could include expanding export controls to Russia to include semiconductors and chips, pieces of high technology that have not been touched before in this situation. It could include an expansion of sovereign debt. And then, as I mentioned before, Nord Stream 2 absolutely could be on the table if we get to one of those worst case scenarios.
Zachary Witlin, Eurasia Group senior analyst, joining us here to break all things foreign policy and these international relations down, especially given the tensions that are still extremely high on the border of Ukraine. All right, great to have you here with us today. We got to leave things there. It's Zachary Witlin, Eurasia Group senior analyst, everyone.